I request Durga Prasad Swaminathan, Chief Information Officer, Cholamandalam Investment and Finance Company Limited, to give the keynote address on stages set for large-scale transformation. Can I have Mr. Durga Prasad Swaminathan on stage, please?
A very good evening to all. I know we've been probably running a bit behind schedule and it's Friday evening. So how many of you are feeling positive about the whole financial services and NBFC domain? Yeah. Thank you so much. And I think almost everyone, right? Maybe except those who are a bit too tired to raise their hands, but otherwise definitely feeling positive. And the kind of presentations and the points that we have discussed during the course of the day is only, driving the whole agenda to a higher level. And to see that, right, meaning I would say there are multiple areas where, India as a country is amazingly positioned to take us all to the next level of transformation in the financial services space. Now, for the first thing is very obvious. We have a huge demographic dividend. There's a very large population, a very large working population with a good spread of urban and rural. And what we have probably as a market perspective, a lot of them are either underserved or unserved. So from a financial inclusion perspective, there is a significant gap for us to still cover. But if you look at it from a digital inclusion perspective, the kind of mobile penetration we have and the kind of services that are available across the population, that is so much more positive. So the financial inclusion can actually be developed on top of the digital inclusion capability that we have in the country in the past few years. So that's the first enabler for the industry as such, the digital inclusion that has happened. The second part that I think is been a huge growth in the past few years is the whole digital rails that the country has set up. Now, if you take a very crude example in a lending space, right? When I want to lend to somebody, I need to know who is that person I'm lending to. The second one is there clear worthiness from a financial perspective for me to lend to that person? And the third is, okay, can I enable the disbursement and obviously the repayment to happen? Now, when you break that down and say what kind of infrastructure we have had as a country, it's amazing that the kind of scalability we are going to have around things like KYC, things around ability to look at the financial profile and ability to create a payment platform, meaning if you see the digital payments, India is #1 in the world. And that's kind of what has happened in the past few years. So the convenience that we see today of using something like a QR code at a roadside shop for a payment transaction, imagine what will happen if you bring the account aggregator kind of capability and the OCEN network, which is the whole credit enablement capability, and say, can I do a lending or an insurance transaction with the same convenience that I do today with a QR code at a roadside shop? So that's the future that we could see going forward. So that's the whole digital rails. Obviously, a lot of that needs to play hand in hand with the third factor that comes into play, which is regulation and innovation. Now, in my view, the regulator's job is probably one of the toughest in the country. On one hand, they need to make sure they are fostering an environment for company to operate well, such that at the micro level, the customer is served well. There is no adverse impact to the customer at the micro level. At the same side, they need to make sure that the companies are operating such that at the macro level, at the economy level, there is no systemic impact. So that's the challenge that the regulator faces. And what you have seen in the past, again, in recent times, is a lot more openness from the regulator to drive new changes. So I'm sure many would have seen how IRDA is now allowed insurance products to be brought to the market without a prior approval to come through. And similarly, if you see changes happening in the co-lending space, digital lending space, the environment that is being created by the regulator is a lot more positive for us in the industry. And the last one, which I think I'm most excited about, is the innovation that has happened in the whole financial services space in the past few years. Whether you take something like customer acquisition, onboarding, origination, underwriting, collections, fraud management, and even areas like security, I think there has been amazing amount of focused solution and innovation that has happened in each one of them. You will have somebody saying, okay, can I take a simple voice calling and bring a whole AI capability there and a targeted services on one end of the spectrum, to somebody who's saying, okay, can I build a complete platform for a lending or a marketplace kind of solution? So that's the whole innovation spectrum that we have seen in the past few years. Now, again, you would have seen the number of presentations that we have had today covering targeted solutions that address the whole spectrum and the life cycle from a lending perspective. So what we are seeing is that on one hand, you have full service banks, you have NBFCs in the middle, and you have the fintechs at the other end of the spectrum. The innovation and ability to work without legacy aspects holding back is most for the fintechs. The NBFCs bring their own reach and ability to go beyond the traditional risk averseness that you might see in a full service bank. So when you take combinations of co-lending and digital lending, we are looking at a significant way to reach out and drive financial inclusion. So that's where I see that when you look at the digital penetration that has happened in the past few years, the national digital rails infrastructure to cover identity, financial profile, and payments, and finally, a very supportive and innovative environment from regulation as well as entrepreneurship perspective. I think we are probably at a very critical stage of positive transformation in the financial services space. So with that, I would like to thank you all for being here and have a great evening ahead.
And I request Dr. Ravi Gupta sir to kindly climb up the stage and to felicitate Mr. Durga Prasad Swaminathan, Chief Information Officer, Cholamandalam Investment and Finance Company Limited. So here we have a small memento as token of gratitude and respect. There's a magazine